Hello and welcome back to Building. You're about to listen to episode 27 that was recorded on the 15th of November 2023, and we're joined by a very special guest, Amy Elliott. Amy is the founder of Malvi Marketer, an agency specializing in copywriting for email, for social media, and she's a personal branding expert when it comes to growing audiences on LinkedIn with over 44,000 followers herself. So we thought, who better to get on the podcast and to help us with our journey, but also we threw in a few questions from our clients along the way. We did something a little bit different in this episode where we conducted the interview using only Amy's posts from LinkedIn. We've had a listen back and we think it's a really great listen, and we do hope you enjoy it. And if you do, please like, share and subscribe.
At the very core, people, they are people. They're not business people. So I think more than anything, it's about what you're communicating rather than how. That leaves you some room to break rules. I think one of the most important things about grammar is knowing grammar, so you know when you can drop grammar and a sentence can still read correctly. It's more about thinking about how you want to be perceived and what your prospect's relationship would be to you.
Declare war on small business owners with the following. I'm tiring of you small business owners. As a marketer, I can't stand your refusal to take risks. Expand.
I just think people place too much importance on themselves, but that is with the caveat that I understand, because it is your baby, it's your child. You rely on it for your income. It's just, social media moves on so fast. You can step slightly out of line and people will forget.
Let's get straight into it then. So what are we on? Episode 27 of Building. And we have a special guest today, Brendan. We're joined by Amy Elliott of, the company is also called this, but I'm just going to call you Malvi Marketing Fame is probably the best way to introduce you. And we're going to do something...
If you say so.
Self-titled. That would be incredibly rude of me if I do the second time to just label you as such. So yeah, I should just say that is not the case. That is self-titled. And we're going to try something a little bit different with you this week, Amy, which is we're going to try and conduct the majority of the next hour using your LinkedIn posts and then allowing you to expand on them. So if that's good with you, I'll hit you with the first post and then we can just run some intros.
I'm going to have to stand by what I've said on the internet, aren't I?
Wow.
Should have been held accountable.
I'll give you the first one, which is a personal favourite of mine. I'm only going to give you the opening because this one's quite long, but it is. Personally, I'm agreeable. Professionally, I am not.
I know
that is
one.
Bold, so expand.
Okay, so as a person, if you get to know me on a friendship level, I do like to get along with people. I'm not the most confrontational person. I value relationships highly. I have a lot of brilliant friends, a brilliant partner, and my family's lovely as well. So I try not to cause arguments. But when it comes to my professional life, I feel like in marketing, you really have to be prepared to back yourself, and that can cause disruption. It can cause arguments, and I don't mind that when I'm standing for what I believe in and I back my own opinion. It's not about going out of my way to be argumentative, but it's being prepared to defend how I view things and lead clients in such a way. If they've come to me and they want to work with me, they are going to get my work. I'm not just going to bend over backwards to do what they want.
It feels like quite a juxtaposition, if that makes sense, like how you can do that from a personal versus professional standpoint. So how can you manage that, right? Because like I'm the same, but I really struggle switching that back from a work to personal life. So how do you do that?
I think it's about being results driven. When a relationship isn't monetary, I don't perceive it in a monetary way. It's like they're not going to measure the value of that relationship in terms of money. So that would be my personal relationships, my friendships, my family. Whereas if I'm working with a client, they are going to expect, if they're giving me money, that they are going to get money back. They are going to make money. They're going to earn. So I value that more highly than keeping them happy in an emotional way.
Is that something you've had to learn over time?
Oh, 100%. I think in my first job, I was very much bend over backwards, try and keep everyone happy, because it's my natural state to try and make everybody pleased and enjoy what I'm doing. I love when people see my work, like client-wise, and think, oh, that's exactly what I want. That's exactly the vision I had. But I've got to a point now where if that isn't going to be the thing that'll make them money, it's no good bringing a smile to their face if they're going to be cross later down the line.
Nice. And that... Go on, Brady, do you have a question there?
Yeah, I do. I've got loads of questions. But I suppose when you were talking initially about it, it made me think about, obviously, me and Harry over time have always been advised we've got to build deeper and broader relationships with our clients, with people that we work with. And I suppose this being direct is, you still can do that, right? It's not a case of you're not going to build relationships by not being direct. Like, how do you manage that as well?
I think being honest doesn't mean being an arsehole. And that's a line that people walk and they don't know where it like the line blurs. People don't know how to deliver honesty with kindness. So I would think building relationships with clients in a way where they still feel they can approach you rather than you bulldozing them is all in the delivery. It's all about thinking, if I was going to receive this critique or I was going to receive the feedback that I'm delivering, how would I want it to be phrased? Would I want people to be honest with me, even if it hurt my feelings? And I know they're invested in the greater good. And for me, the answer is yes. So the relationship is actually built on honesty. If I deliver a compliment, they know it comes from a really sincere place, which means it's worth more.
Very good. Cool. Nice. And so this kind of leads on to the section which I should have said is all about you and your background. And this next post is something that is very close to my heart after essentially doing fuck all for 2 years at the same period of time, which is my English lit teacher was furious when I mentioned I was dropping out of sixth form. Talk to us about that.
So at the time I was in sixth form, I was doing A-levels and I was not thriving. I've never been one to enjoy homework. I basically just don't learn in class. I learn by doing. And that meant taking essays away or doing self-study just didn't work for me. So I was in English literature and I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. This isn't working for me. So I decided I was going to drop out and do a BTEC in travel and tourism instead, where everything was more do and less theory. I think the reason that class didn't work for me is now I'm diagnosed with ADHD. I wasn't at the time. And I felt like I was disappointing a lot of people. But now when I look at where I am and I've got my own business and I've learned things that truly interest me and I can fully exercise my creative muscle in terms of writing, it was the right path. So even if I upset other people way back, I've done the right thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a very brave decision. Like, how do you make a decision like that?
What's the alternative?
Okay.
If you know something isn't right for you, you have to step out. It's like I would then just be living purely for other people rather than to get the best out of myself and to get the best out of the education system that I've been placed into. The reality is that education system, class-based learning, A-levels, was not built for me. And the best thing I could do was remove myself from it and do something else instead.
I love that as like a decision-making framework in general. And like, Brendan, that's something that we've been talking a lot about. Like, all of the calls to action on our website, for example, are like either let's start and then today or let's talk today. And the reason is exactly that. Like, what is the alternative? The alternative is we could do like a 3-month sounding out process, going through formal pitch processes, et cetera, et cetera. Or we could just start and see if we like each other and see if we can drive some results. And if we can't, like, we've explored that alternative. You move on to something else. We move on to something else. And yeah, as a decision-making framework, just 2 things, like what's the worst that can happen and what's the alternative, I think is just a really solid framework to be making any decision.
I back that.
Cool. All right. Nice. Moving on, like all of these posts around like career development, again, are something really close to my heart as well. So this is probably one of my favorite posts, which is digital marketing apprentice in 2019, content exec in 2020, head of copy in 2022, and then founder in 2023. That's a hell
It's
of a
insane.
lot.
When I see it put down on paper, I'm like, wow, that's wild.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. So again, I would say another path, less walked is probably the best way to describe it. Like straight into an apprenticeship. So again, similar story. Was it that you just felt that whole environment wasn't the right environment for you in terms of like further education, and that an apprenticeship was the way to go?
I think university, it didn't appeal to me for all the reasons that A-levels didn't. And I dropped out of A-levels, did travel and tourism, thought, oh, it'd be nice to be an air hostess. And then I was like, for whatever reason, no, that bores me now. Which is a good job because COVID was literally just around the corner and I would have been sat with nothing to do. But I thought, you know what, if I'm someone who learns by doing and I want to exercise my muscles by doing work that's actually going to benefit people rather than just writing it in a textbook, an apprenticeship's the way to go. Even if I wasn't getting paid much, at least I wasn't racking up debt.
Yeah. And the thing that stands out to me, I think will stand out to everybody hearing that, is just how quick like some of those steps are. Like content exec into head of copy in a 2-year period is a very short time frame. And Brendan, obviously this is something particularly close to your heart in terms of career development, and it's something that quite often we have struggled with, which is like expectation management and then showing people, like those routes to progress quickly. So like, what's the trick there? How do you do that in a 2-year time period?
Do you want to hear something very controversial? I left companies. That's what I did. Okay. I didn't get promoted through companies. I left when I didn't feel like I was getting developed enough and there wasn't enough pressure. So for me, what's developed me is my ability to pack up and leave and go somewhere else to learn new things. And that's a running theme throughout my life in terms of how I've got here. I tried travel and tourism. Well, before that, I tried A-levels and thought, no, tried travel and tourism. Then I tried the apprenticeship, and everywhere I went, I was just thinking, what can I learn? What can I contribute? And then when I felt like I'd really wrung that flannel dry, on I went.
Interesting. You said something there that is something that I'm keen to dig into a little bit. You said, like, obviously, yeah, when the like development opportunities aren't necessarily there, but you also said when the pressure isn't there. What did you mean by that?
So I'm somebody who doesn't particularly like to be comfortable. So the max amount of time that I've ever spent in a job is 1.5 years. And that was kind of a running theme. Because by the end of that, I just feel like I've got in the rhythm of the job too much. So I'm treating every day like it's monotony rather than something exciting, something to be conquered, something to be learned. And I don't think it's any workplace's fault that I'm built that way. But as I say, I've just made it work for me. If I felt like I wasn't getting stretched anymore and I was starting to lose interest, I wouldn't be as creative. I would basically be like a dry sponge because none of that excitement was there anymore. So I took it upon myself to then find a new opportunity and move on. Okay.
How does that translate into founder life?
Well, now I'm responsible for me. And if I want to pivot the company, away I go. It's on me to develop myself and find clients to do so, people who want to try something different. And I don't have to get people to invest in me for 1.5 years only for me to then pack up my bags and go to a different company. So now it's all in my hands. It was just natural progression.
Okay, interesting. See, again, this is potentially where opinions would conflict a little bit. So I'm keen to dig into this, which is I'm a big believer in the power of focus, but I see focus as being like over a long-term period of time. And I think where the difference is here is what you deem to be long-term, if that makes sense. So like, I would say like 1 year, incredibly short period of time to get into a rhythm of something, i.e. a job. Whereas what you're saying is actually for you, that is a long period of time. Is that right?
It's as long as I can manage.
Okay. Interesting. Why?
Well, I definitely think it's part of the way I'm wired. It is neurodiversity. Okay. It's like I I wring the most I can out of something, and when there's nothing left to wring, I'm not occupied anymore. I'm vacant. So I need to move on to the next challenge. And being in the driver's seat of your own business means that you find new challenges, and there's the pressure of you being responsible for yourself. So I see my business as a long-term thing, but I will focus on it in short-term stints, and I will develop it into what I need it to be.
Okay, nice. And
sorry, Harry. So, Amy, what's the end goal with the business? Is it just to set up a comfortable life for you, get what you want out of it, and do that? But in the meantime, in those year and a half stints, you'll pivot to the next exciting or interesting creative area.
I think I have visions on always working on my own and just increasing my own value. So I don't see me developing an agency model. I see me developing my own expertise and experience so I can become more premium. So anything I do, I'm thinking, how can I build my experience so that I can be trusted with bigger projects, with bigger brands? Long term, I would like to have more prestigious brands who want to work with me. But in the meantime, I'm just helping people who I like and I understand their vision, and I feel like we get along.
Okay, nice. And you've mentioned your business, and you mentioned wanting to work with more prestigious clients and all of that, which leads me on to hopefully the most clickbait part of the interview, because that'll make the title, which is the section which I'm calling, "What the fuck do you do?" And I'm going to use a post that you put out as, I think, a perfect way to just summarize everything that anybody in this industry experiences when describing this, which is a post from 2 weeks ago, which was, "During a charity event over the weekend, I bumped into a family friend. He politely asked what I do, and I replied, marketing." So what do you do?
Oh, so personally, I use words to express things on behalf of my clients, whether that be how they're feeling, who they want to work with, what they do, what their long-term goal is. I do like landing page copy and emails and LinkedIn posts, but all of it boils down to communication. So what I would say I really do is I help people communicate. If they're selling something good, that results in sales. If it doesn't result in sales, it's probably because they don't have a good product.
And do you think what you do can make up for the product maybe being subpar?
I think I did another post on this actually. I said marketing for a good product is communication. Marketing for a bad product is persuasion. So the second it's hard to come up with marketing material for something, that's when people should really be thinking, is this offer compelling enough? And you really need to start working on the product rather than your marketing.
Okay, nice. And the follow-up would normally be, okay, so you're now a founder. Is it going well? But based on this next post, I'm going to assume the answer is yes, which is, I am fully booked until February 2024.
It's going well.
How does that make you feel?
It's brilliant. I think it's a culmination of years that I've spent on LinkedIn across 2 jobs, because I started not in my previous job, my job before that, that's when I started posting. And all of the effort I put in on LinkedIn, networking, posting, creating content, that has got me to this position where people want to work with me. They know what I stand for. And now I'm not struggling for work at all, which is a real privilege.
What made you first start posting?
I actually got some training from my boss at the time, because he'd built the entire company off of LinkedIn. So he'd got clients from there. He knew the power of it and naturally realised it'd be really beneficial to have his team on there too, because we can all target different types of people. We've all got different personalities, so we'll attract like a wider net of clients. So I got that training and started posting to actually put it to use, and then absolutely fell in love with it. I loved some of the people I met. I made lots of good friends straight away. And it came almost naturally. So I stuck at it, and now here I am.
Just, sorry, slight segue, but on your style of communication, Amy, you've just said the word natural. You come across as a very natural communicator, like verbally and on LinkedIn with your posts as well. I presume you've had to hone that skill over the years that you've been doing it, especially on LinkedIn.
Yes, I think, sorry to bring it back to neurodiversity again, but I've always felt a bit odd one out. So the way that my brain functions is different to the majority of people around me. And to help people understand what I was going through, I would use words. So from a very, very young age, I would write, I would like to talk. I would be really, really good at explaining my feelings because they're different to other people, and I wanted to help them understand. So one of my greatest desires as a person is to be understood, and words are my vice to achieve that. And I can help other people be understood too. That's what I am at my very core as a communicator, and words are my tool.
Yeah, absolutely. You've obviously mentioned ADHD a number of times as well. Do you think that kind of personal vulnerability and kind of personal stories weigh into how other people see and consume your messaging and the content that you put out? It's a question that me and Harry will often say, yeah, your post is great on LinkedIn, but add a personal touch to it. And it's kind of still developing that, like, are these personal stories, that powerful, essentially?
100%. I think at its core, LinkedIn is a networking platform. Unless you're an absolutely exceptional thinker and you have ideas that nobody else has ever had, you are going to be sharing the same sort of lesson as anybody else can, because there's only a finite amount of ideas in the world. And it's the thing that actually makes reading it compelling is to see somebody else's perspective and how it's affected their life. Because there's lots of different writers. I'm not the only writer and I'm not the only competent writer. But giving people insight into how I've got here and what makes writing my greatest passion is unique to me. It's not actually the process of writing or being a writer that's different. It's my take on it. So that's why if people are sharing an idea or a lesson, having a unique spin on it, that's what will make people interested. That'll make them stop the scroll and actually invest themselves into you.
I think it's such a good point, which is, and this is like probably the biggest compliment we can give you about your style of copywriting, is that we had never met until last week. And we had a very short 15-minute call, and then we've just flown straight into this, which is an hour long of two people you've never met just firing questions at you. But what I will say is that, like, we almost knew exactly what you were going to be like from your writing before we even met you. And it feels like a very natural transition. And we've worked with hundreds of copywriters over the last 10 years. And you're one of the very few people we can say that for.
Well, there's no airs and graces with me. And I love that I am the same offline as on.
Yeah. So going through into the copywriting section then, so you have a post around 10 unchanging copywriting truths, and there's one of those 10 that really sticks out to me that I'd love to dive into a little bit more, which is number 7 on your list. The best copywriting predicts and overcomes objection in simple terms.
Absolutely.
I agree with that, but the follow-up question has to be, how do you predict objections?
You have to look at the product and what people have said when you're trying to sell them it. Is it a price issue? And what are people generally saying about the product that you're offering? I'm actually working with a client at the moment who is going to sell a digital course on social selling. And the first thing that I'm thinking is everyone's going to be like, oh, another course, another thing that I'm going to spend my money on and potentially not see through. So immediately you have to think, how do you convince that person that it's not just another digital course? You're almost anticipating what their objections are going to be, because you can't communicate with them other than with words you've already put down on the page. It's not like a sales call. It's you having to preempt somebody else's side of a conversation in flat text.
And do you use any data to do that, or is that pure kind of instinct driven?
You can use data, you can research what people are actually Googling in terms of your product. But I would say the most compelling thing to do is to use your own experience, because you've probably been on sales calls trying to sell that product before. And then you'll know what prospects are saying. What is their objection? Are they saying, why is it so expensive? Because if they are, that would be something you'd address in the text. You'd explain why it's the price it is and why it's a good investment. You would overcome that objection before it comes up.
So we call that audience first. So everything that we do is aimed to be audience first. So we do SEO, that is what we do, but we describe it as audience first organic search, essentially. So almost like that SEO side, looking at the keyword data, understand, like that is almost second to understanding what the audience is thinking. So we call that audience first. So a very simple question, which is like, what does audience first mean to you?
It's funny you say that, because I'm actually in the process of trying to make my content more audience first. Because as a copywriter, the main way that I express myself is through words. But I recognize that people who want to hire me may despise words. That might be why they want to hire me, because they don't want to have to think about them. So I'm thinking, how can I diversify my content to reach those people in a way that they'll actually receive? So how can I start incorporating video? How can I incorporate audio? How could I do some carousels so there's more visual? I'm thinking, what would my audience actually get value from, rather than just putting out what I want to put out, which is predominantly words. Partly why I'm on this podcast, so I can cut up little clips of it and deliver things in a new format that actually works for my audience. But it's primarily just thinking, what do they need? How do they need to hear it? And am I just saying things because I want to say them, or am I offering something that's tangible?
Okay. And how important, and this is following on from another guest that we had on the podcast that's really sparked a way of thinking with our clients now, which is to deliver that, how important do you think tone of voice is?
Incredibly. I think you can't alienate the people that you're trying to speak to. So understanding who your target audience is imperative, because otherwise you're going to be saying words that just don't make any sense to them. You don't want to be too informal or too formal, but you can hop on calls with prospects to understand what words are actually resonating with them, what words are coming out of their mouth. You can use LinkedIn to research prospects and see what comments they're leaving, what posts they're making, how are they speaking. Because if you're too dissimilar, like if you're saying things in a way that you know they wouldn't enjoy, nothing's going to resonate with them, and you're going to be putting effort into social content for no reason.
And I'm honestly so happy you said some of the things that you said there, because it leads me excellently into a question that we've had from one of our clients. So Brendan, you're actually having this conversation with your point of contact at our client around, there was a very big drive to, I would almost say, formalize a lot of the content that we've been writing for them. So a lot of effort and work had been putting from their side on grammar, whereas we were very much pushing them to show personality, which may not always be, say, like grammatically correct, because you may be saying words that may not necessarily fit into a sentence, etc., etc. How do you strike that balance? That is a question from them, that they obviously want to be professional, but they also really want to be more welcoming, given they work in the care sector.
At the very core, people, they are people. They're not business people. So I think more than anything, it's about what you're communicating rather than how. That leaves you some room to break rules. I think one of the most important things about grammar is knowing grammar, so you know when you can drop grammar and a sentence can still read correctly. It's more about thinking about how you want to be perceived and what your prospect's relationship would be to you. Would it be a friendly one? Would you be an authority figure? Because if you're a coach, you don't want to be too informal. You're in a position above somebody, so they don't need to see you as a friend. Where is your business coming in? What position are you going to be in relation to them? And that will guide how formal you are, how informal you are. And if slang would negate that, then I wouldn't use it.
So there's a lot of considerations to this, which got me thinking. So when I was working on these notes last night, one of the things that I was really struggling to picture was, like, let's say I come to you as a new client. There is a lot of information that you probably need to extract from me in order to deliver the best work that you can deliver. So what does your onboarding process look like? Conversation.
Okay. A lot of it is on Zoom, and it's just by talking. I don't have a set I don't have set questions. Even for personal branding clients, I will tailor them to the person and what they want to achieve, because people are so vastly different that you're not even going to get the same level of information out of one person as you would with another with the same question. So what you really need to get to the bottom of is what they're looking to achieve, how you can support them, who they're looking to talk to, and what level are they wanting to come to that person on? Are they going to be friendly with their prospect? Are they going to be an authority figure above their prospect? And then that helps you establish the tone of voice. But having relationship with your client helps you to understand who they are in relation to the business, particularly if they are the founder, because they are the heartbeat of the business. They are the person who started it. So a lot of the business's values will be that person's values.
On that, and the people within the business as well, just helping to, push tone of voice changes through an organisation, because often if they're a bigger organisation, you might be working with the content marketing manager or someone of that kind of mid-level. How do you help them push those changes through to the C-level and those higher up?
See, that's incredibly hard, because even in a small organisation, there can be too many chefs, too many spoons. I think there needs to come a point where you have a conversation about the people who are actually responsible, and you would try and minimise the amount of people who are involved with one piece of copy. With bigger brands, sometimes you have to suck it up, but you can communicate that the results will not be as good as if there were 2 people involved when there's 14, and everybody's just shaping down some of the fun and the shape of that copy because they think it would be offensive, they think it's too cheeky. In a smaller brand, if you're working with a client who is receptive to your advice, you can educate them on why risk would be useful, and why you can say things in a cheekier tone, why you think that's going to speak to their prospects and they're going to appreciate it. But if you're working with a bigger brand where you don't actually meet the high ups responsible for seeing off your copy, what can you do other than rant on LinkedIn that people have no clue that actually having a bit of a personality is going to be a good thing?
So that leads me on to a post from 10 months ago, very nicely, which is where you seem to declare war on small business owners with the following. I'm tiring of you small business owners. As a marketer, I can't stand your refusal to take risks. Expand.
I just think people place too much importance on themselves, but that is with the caveat that I understand, because it is your baby, it's your child. You rely on it for your income. It's just social media moves on so fast. You can step slightly out of line and people will forget. It's not going to tarnish your brand forever. I mean, if you look at big corporations like Nestle and the huge traumatic history that they have, and the fact they're still functioning as a business and people still buy their product, the world moves on. So even if you are risky and you get a bit of backlash, I don't think it means business death. It means that you are going to be that little bit more memorable. You've learned a lesson. You know where the line is. You're not going to cross it again, but you know you can be a little bit cheekier. I always say, and I've just had a new client start posting on LinkedIn for the first time. I've said nobody cares less than they do right now. This is your first post. No one has any expectations of you. Now, that is liberating because we get to experiment. We get to see what people are going to receive well, what people might not like, where that line is. Where are people going to get genuinely agitated with you, but you don't have a huge following, so hardly anyone cares. It's an experimentation process, and I think when you're a small business and you're not a big one, you really can use that to your advantage. You can pivot faster, you can take more risks because you've got less chefs and less spoons. Like, give anything a go.
Yes, that comes down to, so I'm reading The Diary of a CEO at the minute, and law number 12 is you must piss people off. And I completely agree with that. And obviously it comes down to like the 80-20 rule. So essentially, like, you can piss off 80% of people as long as you appeal to 20% of people, because that 20% of the 20% you can potentially sell into. And what I want to do is debunk some of this, or come back to your decision-making framework earlier as to like, what is the alternative? What is the worst that's going to happen? So do you have any examples where you've maybe gone beyond that 80% and maybe pissed off, say, 90, 95%?
No.
Oh, really?
No, I don't have an example of that.
Interesting. That in itself, I think, speaks volumes. In the sense of, we're so worried about, like you point around small business owners not taking that risk. But I would say, like, from reading your stuff, like, it is far and away different and beyond whatever people in the space are talking about. And you do not have, even after, 4 or 5 years of doing this, an example where it's gone that far. And I think that, again, to your point around liberation, should be quite liberating.
Oh, 100%.
Cool. Nice. All right. So let's move on to one that I have literally put in the show notes. I put a separate bracket, which is, I love this one. This one hits pretty hard based on a lot of conversations, Brendan, you and I have been having recently, which is, if you haven't made a single sale from LinkedIn, maybe spend less time babbling in the comments of section of influencers who don't realize you exist.
I think we get so caught up in the celebrity of it all rather than actually focusing on what LinkedIn is at its core, which is networking. If you have a good product and you're genuinely passionate about it, you can talk about it, you can communicate with your ideal prospect, you can figure out what their pain points are, what their objections are to your current product, and you can fix it, and you can start addressing those things in copy. Now, that's a much more efficient use of your time than licking Stephen Bartlett's face.
I mean, I'm sure it's a nice face, but yeah. I completely agree.
Some expensive cream on that. I think it would taste very rich.
So that probably leads on to something, again, this is very close to, like, for context for you, which I know we did briefly touch on when we spoke last week, which is, we're very new to this as well as agency owners. 1225 has been going. I think this is it's 5 months and 3 days. I can get the date. So we're 5 months in, and we are at that stage where LinkedIn was less of a priority for us in our previous roles, right? Like, I had 50 people to manage, and one of them was Brendan. So just managing Brendan took way more time than posting on LinkedIn. So, the point is, right, is that you have to know your why when you start doing this. And you have a post here, which I'd love you to then expand on in terms of how people find that why, which is, don't post on LinkedIn to grow your follower count. Don't post on LinkedIn to practice your copywriting skills. And essentially the point is knowing your why and why you should be posting. So how does someone develop that?
I think it's intensely personal.
Okay.
Like, what would you actually default to talking about if you were with a stranger? Where does your passion lie? And if that doesn't align professionally, then figuring out how to bridge the two. Because I'm trying to think of an example. If you're a home carer and your passion is speaking about caring for people, but your day job is vastly different, potentially talking about your day industry wouldn't interest you, but talking about how you can care for people in your day industry and bridge the gap between the two, your genuine desire to help people and your day industry where that isn't integral to the actual industry, that's how you would relate the two. So everybody has things that they value at the very core of who they are. It's just, how does that relate to business? How can you express that within the realms of business? For me, it is communication. I love to communicate. I love having an idea and bringing it across in such a way that someone giggles, finds it interesting, understands me. Now, I can make that relatable to marketing because that's what I do for my clients and that's how they sell. It's all relational. And that would be my why. I'm born to be a communicator, and that shows in business. So I would ask people what makes them passionate, what is at the core of who they are, and how does that relate to their job.
Okay. And
do you feel, sorry, Harry, just a kind of side note, and we spoke about you must piss people off and elements like that, but do you think how much of the kind of whole puzzle is likability, a person's actual likability, the way they come across? If you like them, surely you're going to follow them more.
I think you like people more when they have something about them that would irritate other people. That's how I feel. It's like you become more convinced that that person is your person because that person isn't everybody's person. So it actually, it increases your affiliation with that person when you see that they stand for the same things as you do. And all the while, you're disqualifying people who you wouldn't want to speak to. I don't want to speak to people who wouldn't like me because I probably wouldn't like them, and it'd be a big waste of my time. So if I can be outrageously me and find people who like me and the same things as me, I'm going to have a much more rewarding time on LinkedIn and on calls and with the clients who come on board than if I pretend to stand for things that I don't stand for.
Interesting. On the flip side of that, can you ever be creative and help someone or a company that maybe isn't likable to a group of people? Can you make it likable through words?
Definitely. I think anybody who's disagreeable still has traits that can be admired, and you would just hunker down on those. You can buy from unlikable brands because they have such a good product. It's not always about likability. It's more about finding the alignment. Where does your needs and your personality align with that brand, even if they are outspoken and somewhat unlikable?
Okay, interesting.
So this is a post from 3 months ago, and this is probably one of the probably the most debated thing in 1225 HQ at the moment. So love to just get someone who understands this way more than us, which is, so if you can't get engagement on text-only posts and your content only works when you attach a selfie, you aren't building personal brand.
That was controversial. I had a few people who were not happy about that, but that is built off my own personal experience. So when I started posting on LinkedIn, I was like, why does my post perform better when it has a photo of me? And it was because men like looking at me. So I soon learned that the quality of my engagement would go right down and people would follow me for my looks rather than for my talent, my insight, my wit. And sure, it took longer to establish myself as a writer whose words were worth reading without my face. But when I did, people affiliated themselves with my ideas. They saw themselves in my words rather than just enjoying what I looked like. And I think that's a really fine line, because I don't hate selfie posts. If you're a visual person, sometimes you like to see the person who is talking. But if you completely rely on pictures, I think it's just because you haven't invested in your words enough. You haven't exercised that writing muscle enough. You don't know how to attract attention with just a sentence. And that would be really beneficial for you.
Really interesting.
I can see both Brendan and I are like, this is interesting. Like, we've debated this so much around, like, even just to little things, which are like, when you zoom out on this and have this kind of conversation, you can see how like irrelevant this becomes. So the statement that I'm going to make, which is, we'll look at a really long post that is filled with, say, story, background information, and like a real narrative to it. And then we'll be sat like, does anybody actually read this? But this comes back to the 80-20%. Like, you don't need 80% of people to read it. You just need it to resonate with 20% of people.
100%. It's not for everybody. You aren't for everybody. If you can disqualify people, it means you're protecting your time. What you really want is to resonate with your prospects and people who would advocate for you and would refer people to you. That's where the money really is.
Okay. So we're coming towards the final couple of minutes that we have with you. So I want to take a bit of time now to reflect and ask some like broader questions. So one of them is 2019 when you started on this journey to where you are now, very short period of time. And I think this is a great getting to know you question that you can ask anybody, which is, in that time period, what is the one thing you're most proud of?
Oh, I think it would have to be having the balls to step out and make my own business, because there wasn't a magical, this is the right time for me. It was right, staying in employment now doesn't make sense. I'm going to have to back myself. I'm going to have to make something that I'm proud of and bite the bullet. And I'm really, really proud that I actually managed to do that at this age.
And now you're obviously in that position. Like the realization that Brendan and I had, and I'm interested to see if this is the same for you, is like July came around after serving. So our notice period was fairly long. We'd been at this company for a long time. So it was a 3-month notice period. And when day one started and then week 1, week 2, I remember walking up the stairs in our office being like, why did it take me so long? Like, and I just wonder if that is how you feel.
I think so, but then I am a big believer in everything being in its time. I think the lessons I learned in employment and the connections I made and the people I learned from, absolutely invaluable. And now I'm in it, I wouldn't have wanted to start at any other time because it's worked.
Okay. And I can't believe we're having these kind of conversations now, which is like 2024 is upon us. I love asking this question. Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? But at the same time, I hate odd numbers with that. So yeah, I get
that. I do understand that. It's like TV volume. I actually am personally in volumes of 0 and 5. That's what I like.
Oh, interesting. I haven't heard any fifth for that one. Yeah, 5 no doesn't work for me. Like I have deep OCD, so like Brendan has, even to little things like I will wash the mugs when we finish for the day, because if they're not all perfectly aligned, no one's leaving the office. Like, I just can't help it.
I need a you about, because no one's washing my mugs for me.
But as we move forward into 2024, a question we'd ask our clients, and I wanted to ask you, which is, what does good look like?
Ooh, good looks like having clients who are excited to work with me and I'm excited to work with, and achieving good results for them. That's really what I want to do. I want to find people who completely understand me and I understand their vision, and we can have fruitful partnerships.
Okay, interesting. Brendan, what does good look like for you?
I think it comes down to finding our focus at 1225. I think conversations like this, Amy, incredible learning for me and Harry, especially. Like we've interviewed a number of agency co-founders, obviously yourself, and some other people in the industry, and it's kind of, you get a clear kind of representation of the mindsets that all of you kind of operate with. And I think because we get to speak to so many different people, our focus like shifts quite often, and we're still finding our feet, if that makes sense. And I think for us, it's finding that focus and really doubling down on it and pushing forward.
Yeah, interesting.
Harry?
So let's end on a guest tradition then, which is if you had to rate your day on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your day?
I want to say a 7. I think it's the fact that the sky is grey, which really does not make me happy. I've got a little sad lamp behind you. So if you think I've got a ring light on, I don't. I'm just trying to not be seasonally depressed. But other than that, I'm going to go out for dinner this evening, and I'm very excited about that. So definitely not a bad day.
Okay, and then the follow-up to that. So we do this every day. So every day when we finish as a team, we sit down, we ask ourselves that question, and then ask the follow-up question, which is, if it's a 7 right now, what would take it to a 10?
I think it'll feel like a 10 when I'm sat down with my dinner.
Okay.
I'm very excited about it.
Which leads to the obvious follow-up. What's for dinner?
I don't even know where we're going. I'm hoping we're going to an Italian because my favourite food at the moment is mushroom chicken. So like breaded fried chicken with like a mushroom sauce and some chips and like peas or whatever. Oh.
So what happens
Delicious.
if you don't get that? You've now got that in your mind. What happens if you don't go to an Italian and have that?
There's so many Italians where I live, and I know that my friend isn't fussy. So if the hankering takes me, Brendan, I will be pulling her into an Italian and I will be getting my mushroom chicken.
Very good.
Do you see that? Even the hand emotions are there. Then. Do you see that? All right, nice. I'm going to finish on actually one final question, which is a question that my therapist asked me, and it's a great way of ending meetings, which is, is there anything you wanted to say in the last hour we haven't given you the opportunity to say?
There's so many thoughts that go on in my mind, Harry. They've all left. They're like little butterflies. I wanted to boast that I've already got my Christmas shopping done. But other than that, I feel so proud because I need you to understand, I know people say this, but I really mean it. I am not an organised person. It takes a lot of effort for me to be organised. But I've been so excited about kind of being able to afford everybody the gifts that I've wanted to get them for years, that I've just overexcitedly done so much online shopping, and now I'm all ready for Christmas and I can avoid the retail nightmare. So
that absolutely terrifies me because I haven't even thought about it yet, and
Sorry.
I know 6 weeks away. But B, that's like a really nice little milestone. From what you've said, it's like being able to afford nice presents for people. It shows that if you work hard, it's these little perks that sometimes, I think more for me and Harry's definitely the more kind of sensible one out of the pair of us when it comes to the finances. And I'm always asking him, when can we get paid, for instance? So, it's just little milestones like that. Like we all need to take stock of those little achievements and recognise
we really
them
do.
as we move
And the
forward.
fact I can choose when I want the time off as well. It's all on me. I can choose when I want to spend time with my family over Christmas, and everything has been earned independently. So I'm not reliant on anybody else. I don't have to be thankful for it from anybody else other than my clients, who I'm very thankful for. It's a new level of pride in your own ability.
I think that's the best way of ending this hour. So Amy, honestly, like you have been incredible. We probably could do another 2-3 hours just asking you questions. So at some point we'll have to have you back on the podcast.
I'd love that. You are amazing fellas, and I've enjoyed every minute.
Excellent. So Amy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow, that was a pretty amazing chat with Amy there. It's quite amazing, isn't it? Like you meet people. I've never spoken to Amy before. You obviously set this podcast up, Harry, and discussed it. The first time I've ever spoken or chatted with Amy was on this podcast recording. I mean, I suppose a lot of podcasts do that, but for us so far, I guess have all been people that we've either worked with or kind of been talking to quite a lot. So that was a different angle for us, and I took a back seat because of that, because you've obviously set this episode up and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the different format as well. I think that worked. So that was a good idea from you, Harry. Well done on that part. But yeah, just Amy as a person, she basically is exactly what she says she is on the tin. And yeah, it's amazing. Like immediately I was like, oh, wow, Amy could really help us. So that was a massive takeaway. And what she was saying resonated so much with us both, especially when you're talking about audience-first content. And I think Amy encapsulates that perfectly with the way that she is and the way that she talked about, tone of voice and getting people to to be human in essence. What did you think?
I completely agree. I think we actually said it in the podcast itself as well, which was, it's rare that you know what somebody is like before you meet them. But having, followed her for over 2 years and read a lot of the posts that she's put out on LinkedIn, like the personality that comes through from her writing is exactly the same as when you speak to her. And yeah, you said like we met for the first time in terms of like face to face last week for 15 minutes on a quick Zoom call, then straight into the recording the following week. And yeah, like she is exactly the same as her writing suggests. And all that has done for me, I say all that, but what it has done for me is definitely pushed us to consider like where our like baseline is and what our benchmark is, and how we go beyond that for our clients. And obviously we scattered a few questions in there from our clients, very much leading on from the conversation that we had with Mike a couple of weeks ago, right? Where when we were speaking to Mike, the big revelation, if you want to call it that, but the big takeaway that we both had was the need to really be focusing on tone of voice. And obviously wanting to do the best for our clients, we took that and moved it straight into the communications we've been having with our clients. And Brendan, you've been working very closely with one around tone of voice. And the big thing that was coming up there was how there's been a drive to almost formalize a lot of their content, when in reality for that audience and, like the mindset that audience is in when they're consuming the content, they don't want that formalized approach. And then the challenge to that is, well, what do you sacrifice in order to deliver that more audience first approach? And they were perhaps finding it hard with the grammar and things like that. So to be able to ask Amy that question and then see how she would process that and then articulate that to a client has been hugely helpful. And I think it's something that is going to set us up, but more importantly, hopefully set the listeners of this podcast up for success when it comes to copywriting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a takeaway for me as well from this podcast, from what Amy was kind of discussing, going away and having a look at some of the content that's produced on the internet. We know that it comes in a stock format. It's written for SEO, and I think one of the big kind of markers of content for SEO is it's self-serving. If a brand is producing content, it's self-serving the brand. If people are posting on LinkedIn about certain messaging, I don't think they're necessarily thinking of the audience first and what's best for the audience. They're thinking what's best for their company. What can we sell? What can we do? And I think that's really clear. And the other point is obviously personality. I think that goes hand in hand with tone of voice, but personality is huge. It's the bit of advice that Sam Butterworth, another of the content guys that was that era that we worked with, Sam always used to tell me, like, never be scared of adding personality to your writing, like blog posts and stuff. So that's a bit of advice that I just keep in back of mind whenever I'm producing blog posts nowadays for 1225.
Yeah, and I think like the big challenge also is, and this is something that sits with us when we speak to clients, is we need to move out of the mindset of thinking of content as blogs. Like, obviously, I know we're not, but even there, like the example that you jump to is, when I'm writing blogs, but it should be when you're doing anything really. And when that's LinkedIn posting, if it's YouTube videos, if it's TikTok, if it's your blog post, if it's a piece of website copy, if it's a landing page, it's everything. And what we need to be focusing on is the fact that it's not just blog posts, and that it is this whole ecosystem that you have to be feeding and you have to be generating and you have to be owning, right? Like we talk about it a lot, which is we need content that owns every stage of the buyer's journey. And the big challenge that I think we have between us have been struggling to articulate is where that gap is at the moment. And I think Amy really helped us highlight where that gap is in order for us to go and close it and then raise the bar and deliver even better work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Amy recognised it in the podcast when she said, like, that's why I'm on this podcast, because I can use the clips on social media and move that. Like, and that's exactly it. I did also mention LinkedIn posts, by the way. I didn't just jump straight to blog posts, but I fully get it. It's exactly what we're trying to do. We're spreading our message on this podcast on, all sorts of different medias. You're on TikTok, building that audience on TikTok. So it's it's that process, and it's kind of thinking. It's a mindset as well. It's thinking about the audience first. It's not like everyone says that all the time. So, who's your target audience? What's that in mind? But you might have all that information, but you still write it in the frame of mind of you as the author or of the company that you're writing for. What are the messages the company want to get out to the customer, whether they want them or not? And actually, it should be shifting completely. Oh, the audience have got this question.
Yeah.
How do we answer that question? Forget about the company, forget about the products and all of those that you're actually answering. Just answer the audience's question. So, and I don't think anyone's kind of hit that truly the nail on the head there. And I think that striving for that and having conversations like this with Amy, like we had a couple of weeks ago with Mike, and like me and you constantly do in the office as well. That's what we need to keep doing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this has just come to me now, but one thing that I would love to do as we move forward on this podcast, and if you meet this criteria, like please message us, is I want to go find someone who specializes in customer service and customer experience and go speak to them. I think we talk a lot about a relentless focus on the customer experience, and I'd love to dive into that more. I think you are absolutely right in what you're saying there, which is there's one thing saying, think of your target audience or start with your target audience and then actually doing it and finding someone who specializes in customer experience and customer service and things like that, I think will help really take that to the next level. So yeah, if you fit that criteria, please let us know and we'd love to get you on the podcast. If not, we'll have to go find somebody, Brennan, but I think that would be a really interesting next step to explore when we look at this pursuit of, I guess, customer focus and also audience first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Nice. So I think the only other thing to say is, Amy, thank you again for coming on the podcast. Both Brennan and I found it fascinating, and we can't wait to have you back on. And to everyone else, thank you for listening. And as we said earlier, please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this one.
And for other listeners as well who like the journey that we're on at 1225 building, that's what it's all about. Lots of things have happened over the past few weeks that we're working on in the background. We will have a co-founder chat away from the guest appearances soon. So for now, obviously, enjoyed the conversation with Amy. Amy, thank you very much. Other than that, I'll end it as ever with swing well, putt true.